Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to MindShifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of So Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce.
To the brightness within you and the truth that is rooted within me.
Well, welcome to the show, everybody. We're delighted to be sharing another day with you. And celebration or the honoring of Memorial Day, and actually both Memorial Day and Veterans Day with a request and an invitation. We invite you to be part of the team that changed the world. How is that going to happen? Well, our invitation is that today and every day, everybody on the show, if you would, pick one issue, one situation where you're willing, instead of blaming somebody else if there's hostility or fear in you, to forgive. And, of course, that doesn't mean let them off the hook for what's going on inside of you, but rather to reach inside of yourself and change the dynamic in you that produces that form of hostility or fear. That process is called forgiveness. And so we invite you to participate in that, and if you're not familiar with the conversation, we invite you to go to our website, www.whyagain.com. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says Download Worksheets. So we invite you to go to that link, Download Worksheets, and the first 4 items on that list will give you the whole story of forgiveness, how to go inside yourself, how to crash the projections of the mind that pretend it's all everybody else's fault, and how to crack open the dissociated states of mind that keep the parts of you hidden that you want to blame on somebody else. And when you let go of it, you'll be part of creating a critical mass that will change the dynamic of war on planet Earth. The root of all war, I would offer, is, as James said 2,000 years ago, the war within our members, that is, within our own being, or probably more properly, our own non-being. So here we are, working with forgiveness, and I think we've still got Dale Allen Hoffman on the show, who was just on Carol Guy's show, and we're going to chat with Dale. Dale's a young man. Well, I'll let him share his history with you. Dale, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. It's great to hear your voice.
Oh, awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your story in terms of, for those who don't know Dale Allen Hoffman, being one of the world's primo Aramicists, and looking into the depth of the truth of the Aramaic. And so, Dale, share a little bit about where you come from, how this all got underway for you, and what your work is today.
Well, long story short, when I was about, 17 or so, I was spending a lot of time in New York City doing a lot of acting things and modeling and all that kind of stuff that people do, and they don't know what else to do. And someone it originally started with my acting coach, Bob Collier, putting a book in my hand called The Secret of the Ages from Robert Collier, and also a couple of Napoleon Hill books. And from that took me into Marianne Williamson and Wayne Dyer, and that took me to A Course in Miracles. And at some point I went down in 93, moved to Florida, and I kept hearing people talking about this Michael Ryce guy. And I started to do this weekly gathering that some friends were having from my Course in Miracles group, something called Still Point Breathing. And then they would say, eventually about a year and a half into that, someone said, Dr. Ryce is coming to town. And I went to, the first time that I saw you was 1995, early 95, at the Center for Conscious Living, which is now Center for Spiritual Living Florida, Suncoast. It was in Clearwater, and I think it was at the, it was actually at the Center for Conscious Living. And that night I met Reverend Pat Palmer there, and I heard, I believe it was why the first one was, "Why is this happening to me again?" And I'll always remember, I'm getting a lump in my throat here, I'll always remember that what you were saying was, when I was a kid, I would read the Bible a lot, more than most, but I was always seeing and hearing something different than what was on the page. I don't know how else to describe that, except, and I would go to a minister and say, it says this in Luke 17:20. He'd be like, "What are you reading?" It'd be like this. And he'd go, "Well, it doesn't say that. It says this." And it was hearing Michael speak, doing Why Again, that it was the first time I had ever heard someone that actually put into, I'm losing it here, put into words what I was hearing in my head, what I was feeling in my heart since I was a little kid. I had never heard another human being on the planet ever really say it like that. And my entire, it was like you could have peeled me off the wall. My entire life, my entire reality shifted. And then, you're like, come to Heartland, my teaching center in the Ozark Mountains. And immediately I was like, I walked up to you and I'm like, I don't know, I have to do this. I have to do it. I don't know how, I don't know. And, of course, a few months later there I was at Heartland. And, wow, it's been phenomenal ever since. It's been a heck of a ride, and it continues to be. It's really beautiful. And I can't thank you enough. I know I've said that a million times, but yeah.
I'm delighted to be on the team and delighted to have you on ours. And you disappeared for a few years in there after you left Heartland.
I did. And, it's funny because I was just thinking about that, too, how I don't know how long it was, and I tried to go back to living, a normal life, let's put it that way. And my life started to implode upon itself. I had since gotten married, and then my wife and I started, we had the 2-year curse or whatever, and things started getting really intense. And I remember I went to your website, and I think I re-signed up on your email list, and I got a message from you, saying, "Hey, let me have your phone number. I want to give you a call." And you called, and you came back. It's like you reemerged in my life right at the exact moment. And my wife and I essentially sort of tied ourselves together, chained ourselves together, and said, this is it. We're going to do this. And we dove headfirst into worksheets and the process, and it's never stopped since. And that also got me, because in that interim period there, I was doing a lot of really scholarly studies of Aramaic, and I was getting really heady intellectual about it and really sort of hot air and all that kind of thing. And when you came back in, it was like, oh, there's more to this than that. And wow. And it was actually through your work that the Aramaic Healing Circle and what I do was born. And it was for doing that, a gathering every single week. Man. And it's just been, ever since, it's been more and more beautiful day by day. It really is. It's awesome.
Very cool. And, when you speak about that intellect, it's interesting how we can get trapped in the intellect and think that that's where the secrets are. And the truth is that the secrets are hidden by the mind, not in the mind. And in order to really, truly heal, you've got to be out of your mind and into the being, into the word that is the expression of who we really are. And instead of our head's interpretation of it all, instead of trying to have an intellectual understanding, to actually step into the state of a human life. And our definition, for anybody who hasn't been on the show before, our definition of a human life is not an intellectual thing, not something you say with words, not something in your head, but hold a newborn child. When you hold a newborn child, as you've just recently had the experience of your newborn, and I got to hold my grandchild for the first time, my new baby Adeline Nora, about 4 weeks ago, and then Shemaiah is here in the world, and hold a newborn, and you know exactly what human life is. You can't figure that out with your head, and you can't put that in your intellect, but you can experience a life from that state of being. And so the forgiveness process becomes so urgent because it's how you dismantle or dissolve or remove all those things that block you from it. So it's pretty awesome. Tell us about your daughter.
Oh, wow. She's
I don't like to talk about her, but
yeah, well, I while we're on the subject of daughters, send our congratulations to Krista, because that's awesome. That's cool. It's interesting that we had in sort of like in the birthing process, Loretta was in labor for like 5 days. It started on Monday, and then on it was 4 days, and on Thursday she went to the midwife, and they decided that they were going to try to scrape her membrane, as they say, and all of a sudden everything just went into an onslaught, and they're like, okay, now you're going to have to rush to the hospital. So I'm flying, from South Asheville to Mission Hospital in Asheville, trying to simultaneously get my smartphone to work, and they only work when you don't need them to work, and trying to call people. But anyway, we get to the hospital. We're in the room for not even 2 minutes, and she makes her presence. Here she comes really fast. And at first, I'm not noticing. Something seemed different, and I wasn't sure exactly what that was. And I'm looking around, and I heard one of the nurses saying, the call. And I went, the call. So I'm thinking in my head, C-A-L-L, call. And I'm like, the call. What does that mean? There's no phones. What's going on? And they're like, no, she's born in the call. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, do you see that? She came out scraping the membrane. The membrane didn't actually break, but it did bring the contractions on stronger. She was born in completely in her amniotic sac. It had broken, actually, but the water never came out of it. And she came out in that full sac, and she had like this membrane, which is called the call, over her face, over the top of her eyes, and they had to kind of peel it back off of her eyes. And I'm sitting there watching it, and it's like it had been a while since the last one, so it's not registering for me that there's something unique about that. And then all of a sudden they're like, she was born in the call. She was born in her sac. They're like, that's very, very, very unique. So I started Googling it there a few hours later, but she came out really quiet. And then they did, they got the stuff out of her mouth, and she went, like that really quick, and then she was quiet. And then they took her, after about 2 minutes being with Loretta, they took her to start measuring her and doing all that stuff, and she started crying. And I immediately leaned forward, and she took my finger, my little pinky, and I looked right in her eyes, and I was maybe 2 inches from her eyes while they were doing different measurements, and she was going nuts. And I just started saying Bereshit to Lichua Milta, and I started actually saying the Gospel of John. And then I started saying different, colloquial, Aramaic niceties to her, and she just immediately stopped and completely focused in on my eyes. And then they took her away to weigh her on the scale, and she peed all over the place. That worked good. And she was going nuts again. And then I kind of hovered over top of her, and I started doing it again, and she silenced again. And I noticed, throughout that day, if I was speaking English, she would sort of be a little bit fidgety. She'd kind of pay attention, no matter what tone my voice was taking. But then when I would start speaking Aramaic, she really was focused in. And I said it to Carol that I've never in my life met a happier, more balanced, I don't like talking about our kids. She's just so, you hear it all the time, she's an old soul. I feel that about all three of our children. With her, there's just something really, wow, she's phenomenal. And the name, she named herself with us in a dream, and we were having dreams about her in advance, and then when she did show up and I saw her face to face, it was like, oh, it's you. It's nice to see you again kind of thing. And, yeah, she's an amazing little girl. She's very, very super sensitive. If we have her, we've taken her to some of my events and other kinds of sort of spiritually themed events. And if the atmosphere, if the consciousness in the room gets strong, it could be, somebody could be irritable, or it could be just a lot of love or just happiness. Even if it doesn't have a sound to it, she gets really sensitive. It's just amazing. Yeah, like I say, I don't like talking about my kids or anything, but she's beautiful, though. And her name, it just fits her perfectly. It fits her perfectly.
Very cool. Shemaiah, heaven.
Yeah.
Heaven on earth. And, as you look at that whole experience, you'll notice that what the world does is it instantly wants to take the child out of its natural state of being and its natural process. Oh, we have to measure her. Oh, excuse me. 4 hours from now, she's not going to be a centimeter longer. Thank you very much. Just leave her alone. Let her be with her mother and her father. Excuse me, this birth process in this culture is insane. Thank you. I have no interest in how long she is. I have no interest in how much she weighs. I certainly have no interest in you putting a needle in her body so she'll scream in rage. Thank you. Let's just stay in the state of being in the Word. Let life live through this form, and the culture makes sure very quickly that that the child is not in that natural state of being, but gets torn out of it by control of the world and the games of the world. And God forbid the child is male, and they start with a pair of shears on one of the most tender parts of the body, snipping away as much as 50% of the tissue there. And you start to look at it, and the whole thing gets pretty bizarre.
Yeah, it was. They mentioned Asperger's or something like that. They're saying she was slightly under the line or something like that. And literally, my wife and I looked at each other. We're like, we don't care. We have her back now. It's the thing though. It was she was with Loretta at first, and then they gave her a few minutes, and then they did it. They sort of pulled her into the system in a way. But it was. It's amazing how. How connected, and it's funny, I even use the same analogy. A child, when I explain heaven, I'm like, a child, the first 20 minutes of life, that living, breathing being, that warm little cocooned, just amazing energy, and it's like, you can ask people, what are the words for it, and here's all the words, exactly like you do. Which of the workshop is it? Is it Why Again, or... that you do it
with the question of how, put a word to the essence of the newborn.
Yeah, and it's like, yet even in the same token, it's like none of the words touches it. But yet just saying those words, you're in that state of being. It helps at least partially put you back there. And I tell people, if you've never held a child in the first 20 minutes of life, hang out at the hospital or something outside one of the doors in the maternity. No, they'll probably think you're going to take one, but... it's just, and I remember, too, a friend of mine down in Florida, before he was a New York cop, his name was Phil, and it's like if you were to hold his hands behind his back, he would go mute because he was Italian, and always, hands flopping. But he came up to me the day before our first daughter, before Lucinda was born, and he's like, Dale, I want to tell you something. He sounded like the anteater from Pink Panther. He's like, I want to tell you something, that there's things that I want to say to you right now, but you really won't understand them until tomorrow, or till the baby's born. He's like, once that baby is, because we were pretty sure it was going to happen overnight, once that baby's born, then we can have certain conversations that I can't really have with you right now. He's like, then you'll know. And then 2 days later, when I came in after Lucinda's birth, and I walked up to Phil, and I'm all choked up, and I said, I understand. He's like, I knew you would. So it's like, it opens up a whole range, an experience that just, wow. It's almost like my entire life led up to not any other great supposed accomplishment I did, but it was actually led up to being a father. And that's when I really started to understand what it was I was,
go back to Yeshua. He says, be as a child. Go back to Yeshua. He says, there's so many things I want to say to you, but you can't hear them yet until we've got the brain cells, until we've got the experience. There's no way to put that into the mind. And we live, in a culture that says, Dad, you're supposed to be drunk and giving out cigars. Mom, this is a disease you've got. In order to get third-party pay, it's legally defined. Pregnancy is defined as a disease. Mom, you have no part in this. Let us just drug you and get you out of the picture. And now neither one is home for that direct experience of this awesome active presence of love entering into our world. And, it's just, the whole culture is just so insane and bizarre and inside out and upside down that it's amazing. And we, I think, have children at maturity because that's the point at which we're designed to be reminded of the direct experience of the awesome active presence of love that we are. And I believe that when we have that experience, it's designed to teach us to dissolve, to forgive all the other messages that we've been given. Now, kings don't want you to dissolve those messages. Kings put those messages in you so that you would be controllable your whole life long. And that's why Yeshua said, know the truth. Have a direct experience of the truth, and you'll be free. You'll be freed of all of that. But, Dad, get drunk, give up cigars. Mom, get drugged. Don't be here. And then we'll be able to control you for long.
You said something so important there, too, because you said know the truth. The phrase I always hear people spit out is the truth will set you free. It's not the truth sets you free. It's knowing the truth. It's the direct personal experience, the direct intimate experience of truth. That is what sets you free. And so many people forget that word. They forget the experience of it. They think it's just a willy-nilly truth floating around in the ethers is somehow going to set you free. We have to do that work. That's what we're here for. And I also love what you said about how it happens in maturity as a reminder. That's such a beautiful insight. That's so beautiful.
And we just actually put a new version of the worksheet, the forgiveness process, on the website. And you remember that in step 7 we talk about creating truth, and a young lady who actually just moved to Heartland, a couple that just moved next door to us, our new neighbors there, had called and was asking the question about, well, are we creating truth? And so we've changed that word creating truth to admitting truth. Not as in I admit this is true, but rather creating the space, much as the Lord's Prayer speaks of, carve out a space in us for your presence or for truth, that we admit, we allow in this truth that we are. And I don't believe there's a more powerful space for that happening than in the presence of that newborn energy, which is not yet locked into or tainted by the world's insanity and all the genetic predispositions that the world is going to start triggering to drag us out of the truth of who we are and put us into the King's service.
Yeah, absolutely. I just did a what is today? Thursday, Friday. Last Saturday we had a still point breathing thing here, and people had so many questions before, like, what about, what's it like, what's it this, what's it that, and I'm like, here, and I had just about every question they had boiled down to one thing. I was like, here's what you need to remember. And I kept saying it. It's like, and I just kept getting back to that breath. I had already shown them, the mechanics of that breath, and I'm like, this is what you need to remember. They're like, what if this happens? And we talked about certain things, like, if the tetany comes in, different areas of the body, the energy field work, etc. And I'm like, if you could just remember this in your life, getting back to the breath. And then I started talking about a baby, and I said, talking about Shemaiah specifically, and I was like, when I have that living, breathing being. There was no me plus baby at that point, and my breath was moving, and we started to talk about those times when someone pulls out in front of you on the road, or the person you can't stand walks into the room and your breath catches. And I tell them, the closest experience that I've ever had to actually holding one of my children in my own hands in that first 20 minutes was actually still point breathing. And it was the kind of thing where you go through this process that in some cases it seems like you're trying to force yourself to do something, but it's like you go through that process so that on the other side your stupid brain will get out of the way just long enough to actually let you have an experience of actually being fully present right here. And that's exactly what you say. You've got to be out of your mind. And that's the other funny thing when I think back to the scholarly people that I was hanging out with, and at one point I was like, you guys are really arguing about, does it mean this or does it mean that, this dot or this slash mark? And it's like, I just want to, just really quick, I have a question. Has anyone tried to actually put this into practice? Rather than arguing about that stuff, have you tried to put it into practice? And it's like, well, we're not here for that. We're here, because this is what we do. And it's like, I think I'm in the wrong room. And, a good example of that.
One of the things, when I teach a Course in Miracles class, the first thing that I do, because most people are there studying the Course in Miracles, is I'll go up to the board. You may remember me doing this in Florida. And in the largest letters possible, and I usually use a 4x8 board for those who haven't been in my workshops, 4 foot by 8 foot. And I'll put
I know what's coming.
Don't study a Course in Miracles. And most people are aghast. It's like, Michael, what's wrong with you? What do you mean don't study a Course in Miracles? That's what we've been doing for 20 years. It's like, no, learn forgiveness. We're here to
Exactly.
learn to remove what never belonged. We're not here to do some sort of an intellectual journey. If you listen to the Course says throw this book away. The truth can't be said in words. Why would we want to study words? And we ascribe to words the frequency that comes out of our mouths. We ascribe that a power to tell the truth, and it can't do it. But it can give us the tools that lead to an experience. Now you go to that Pentecostal experience where the disciples had the direct experience, and of course the Greeks translated as Yeshua breathed on them.
Yes.
What's the Aramaic definition of that one, Dale?
It's interesting because you had a gut feeling about that for so many years, and then I eventually one day went and looked at it, and I've had the distinct pleasure, thanks to you, to be able to look right at the Khabouris manuscript pages. I've got them. And I mean, the first time I remember looking through it and finding the Beatitudes for the first time in Matthew and Mattai, and I literally broke down. I'm starting to again. It's such an amazing experience. But there's little prefixes on Aramaic. There's the different sounds, da, la, ba. Lamed is the la sound. The bait is the second letter of the alphabet. Now, in that phrase, it says Yeshua breathed, well, in the King James, Jesus breathed on them and said, receive ye the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost, it's like a threat. And I went looking at it in Aramaic, and you had said in a still point thing, I don't know, years ago I first heard you say that your gut told you that it probably said breathed with them or something along those lines. And I went looking in there, and one thing that I learned from Aramaic is that the la sound, la, always means on, toward, or at. So in that phrase, if it would have said napak lahun, it would mean that he had breathed on them, toward them, or at them. Okay, like he's got the power and he's breathing it at them. And what's interesting is I looked at it in Aramaic and it says napak bahun. Now ba, the ba prefix, that B sound, today, I will say this, today it's become mishmashed with the la sound. In modern Syriac, people will use ba and el, the ba and la sounds interchangeably, and it could be on, toward, at, within, from, through, anything like that. They mix it up. And I started digging back, saying something's not right here, something's not right. Come to find out, in the first several centuries, right around the time of Yeshua, that ba sound strictly meant through, with, or from within. So if you look at that, he breathed with them, or he breathed them through what was happening. This is after the resurrection. And I still remember when I saw that, and it jumped off the page at me, and it was like a pop, and I just burst into tears, but I wasn't crying of sorrow, it was laughter, and I had these belly laughters, and Loretta comes in all the time when I'm doing some little translations, and she sees me simultaneously crying and laughing, and it's just an awesome thing. Yeshua breathed with them, or breathed them through, and said, receive ye Rucha D'Kudsha, the all-embracing breath of God. What a difference. What a difference. Instead of him having all the power and he's spitting it at him,
Well, the Greeks, not having the experience, are trying with their intellects to figure something out, and until you can translate the idioms and the deeper meanings, it's just lost. And one of the other things that I've noticed over the years, and I've asked, of course, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, how many have ever been with somebody in the last hours of their lives if it was not a crisis passing? And what did they do in the last hours of their lives? They all do still point breathing. It's the most natural thing in the world to do before going. And I think that what happens is, as the physiology is starting to break down, one stepping into a near-life experience, they're seeing things from other levels, and they're being guided to dump some of the garbage before they leave their bodies so they don't have to carry it all with them. And, of course, if we've got the support and the instruction, we don't have to wait until death for that to happen. We can do it on an ongoing daily basis.
That's absolutely, with my mother, when she passed from cancer, it happened the last few hours. We'd have the breath, and then there would be little pauses. And to me, it was like looking at someone doing still point breathing, though I never connected the two together until you said that. That's true.
Almost everybody who has a non-crisis death does still point in the last anywhere from 6 or 8 to 48 hours. They spend those last hours doing still point and going into that deeper level of process. That's just the natural part of the game.
That's beautiful.
Well, yeah, it is. It is. Well, let's check in and see if Dr. Tim is with us.
I am here.
Awesome, sir. I wonder how you be today.
Quite well. I'm reveling in it. I listened to the last 20 minutes of Dale's discussion on Carol's show and was thrilled that I could get the board up for this show. So, welcome. Thanks for being here, Dale. It's fabulous to hear you.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for being here.
And thank you for doing that, Tim. Jeanie is off at her parents' farms where there's no internet connection, so thanks for taking over the show. And do we have any callers? Let's check in and just see if we have any callers or anything, questions or thoughts happening in the chat room.
We have a number of callers listening in. We had somebody who had their hand up for the longest time, an 810 area code. They've just dropped off. Nobody else with their hand up right now, and the chat room's fairly quiet. We have a number of people in there just listening. So,
well, if our caller wants to call back in, we'll be glad to take a call. Otherwise, we'll continue with the show. And is David with us?
That would be what number am I looking for with that?
It'll be a 417. I think it's 256.
255. He doesn't have his hand up. There's a 417.
Yeah, that's probably David. Why don't you tap him in so he can say hi? And do either of you gentlemen have any questions for Dale or any thoughts for Dale? It's a privilege to have him with us.
Well, I'm just in awe. I get your emails, David, and I'm looking forward to the DVD. I've only been doing the work for about 7 years, and just absolutely enjoying being here and being able to listen to you directly.
Well, 7 years is a long time if you're doing the work, though, in a good way, though. So, 7 months, 7 days even, can be quite a pretty sweet, juicy time. So
yeah, we've had some people in the past year since Michael was down in Florida last year who really hit the ground running and doing a lot of powerful work. And sharing it in Spanish.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, now I'm always fascinated by all the languages that the book keeps getting translated into. I always think that's been cool too. So, and you did, Michael? Didn't you do?
Dale, I don't know if I shared this with you, Dale, but we've got somebody who's translating, an attorney actually in Palestine that's translating into Arabic, and
oh wow.
Some peace initiatives between the brothers in the Middle East to see if we can help the family system to get past some of the power person dynamics and some of the insanity, and let's get back to being human. Let's get back to embodying a human life rather than the pain, the rage, the fear that the world has filled us with, and that we perpetuate unknowingly. That somebody sooner or later has to get big enough to embrace the pain of all the insane things that we've done to ourselves and each other, and to change that dynamic. So that's another exciting project that's happening. Aside from, we've got somebody working on Brazilian, Portuguese, and French and Italian. So there's lots of good stuff happening with the book and the work getting around.
That's beautiful, yeah. And speaking of Palestine, I think of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, how we often mistake our own hostility as the quote-unquote word of God or the will of God. And, of course, we act on that passion, and that's where this destructive nature comes from. And I think of it, it's true. The number one drug on planet Earth is hostility. And when you think that hostility is some sort of God-given right passion coming through you, that you're somehow doing the will of God, just how yucky and destructive that can be, not only to your own system, but just to life in general. Wow, that's beautiful that you're getting it into Arabic. That's beautiful.
Well, we have our 810 caller back on if you want to take that.
Let's go for it.
So, 810, you're on the air.
Welcome to the show, 810. Give us a name and where are you calling from?
My name's Adam. I'm calling from Attica, Michigan.
Hi, Adam. Welcome to the show. How can we support you today?
Oh, thank you very much. Well, actually, you've been supporting me for a while. I've been doing the worksheets, and I've committed doing 6 a day, and I've been doing that for about 20 days. And
Awesome.
Yes. So thank you. Your work has been very helpful.
Isn't it interesting how many things we can have going on under the surface and we don't have a clue that it's there? I mean, to me, it's always mind-boggling. And, you know, as I do my own process and continue my own work, it's just, it always amazes me at what we can have going on under the surface. And, of course, in the Aramaic, there was a suffix that was added to words to tell us it was going on under the surface, and that was totally lost when it was translated into the Greek. So what kind of support can we be for you today, Adam?
Well, yes, I totally agree. It is amazing what lies underneath all these things that I had no idea were running in my life, and now I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense why all this stuff is going on. So, well, I would love some support, and I've been in a relationship for the past 3 or so years, and we have a son together and a son by relationship. So we have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, and it's just been a really challenging path. She came from a very challenging background, and I still don't understand exactly how we came together, but I go through periods where I really feel hopeless when things aren't working out, and I don't see how it's going to work out. And right now has been one of those two. What's that?
That's awesome.
Yes.
I suppose why you guys are together. She's here to show you how to heal your hopelessness, because notice that hopelessness is not something that belongs to her or, in fact, has anything to do with her. It's yours, and in this relationship, you get to look at that so deeply and so experientially and forgive it, remove it. So we know one of the reasons why you're together.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Have you done many worksheets on hopelessness?
Yeah, I've done quite a few, and I'm actually doing some work with Rex, too, and he's been really helpful in helping me get under the surface of it.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there something in there that we can actually answer by the way of a question, or? Sure. I'll
try for that one. I've been, I haven't been thinking as clearly. Sometimes when I go into these spaces, I don't think as clearly. So I've been in a state of somewhat confusion and just, a little bit of shutdown. But specifically, I guess.
Confusion is one of the signs of healing in process. Energetically, these frequencies that we put in our minds that come from our thoughts and then cycle in our minds are electrical by their basic nature. And those things which are electrical in our structure are just like light energy. They're additive and subtractive. So if let's say, as an example, I have a white light, a red light, and a blue light, and I shine them on a white board, we get clarity on each of those lights. And if I shine them all together on the board at the same time, I don't get clarity on any one of them. Now, we know scientifically there's no such thing as red or blue or white. Each one of them is just a frequency that is interpreted by the mind as that color. And those frequencies are different wave shapes, and as such, they're additive and subtractive. And so when we put them together, we see a mix or a confused picture of red, blue, and green. Now, thought, or what's called thought, energy stored in brain cells, are exactly the same. So when I have conflicting thoughts, when the active presence of love shows up, and I want to embody that, then what I'm going to have to do is splash out those things that don't make room for that active presence of love. And when those two things show up in my mind simultaneously, it's like collapsing the red, blue, and green light in one space. There's a mixture of frequencies. It's called confusion. And that's one of the symptoms of healing. And that's where you want to breathe and where you want to be committed and keep doing your work and processing through those things. So you're right on track. That's awesome.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Cool.
It's good to know because, it's not always Dr. Feelgood, I've heard you say.
It's not Dr. Feelgood at all. And when you recognize, there's some information that says that the number of connections possible in a human brain is 800 times the number of molecules in the known universe. This neural net has literally our whole genetic history. And you're not going to process through the hopelessness, the helplessness, the confusion, the pain of relationship when you look back at your family system and you look at, think about what was probably going on in your family system 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300, 500, 1,000 years ago. You're not going to process through that in the first week or month or year or 10 years. The cleansing process is a long-term process. All of people will say to me, well, Michael, you've been doing this work for 40 years and you're not finished, so this must just be a waste of time. It's like, no. When you realize we're living on top of how many generations of confusion that create this state of unconsciousness or the desert within us, and it's going to take some time. In fact, the Jews wandered in the desert for 40 years. That's the place where, you hit that 40-year point and you're kind of starting to make a dent in your work, but you're still not finished. So be patient with yourself, be patient with her, and when that doesn't seem possible, there's your next piece of work. There's your next forgiveness piece. And I'll ask Dale or we'll ask Dr. Tim and David if any of them have any input for you.
Great, thank you.
I was going to say I definitely would. It's funny that when you mentioned hopelessness, I was right there with Michael going, good thing, and it took a while for me to get to that. And I think of even many years later, sometimes it's one thing for us to looking at your process, but for me, sometimes things still pop up, and thank God there's still stuff to pop up, stuff that we can heal together, and we're committed together. I'm in a very committed relationship, so when stuff does pop up, there's times when I go blotto, and sometimes she has to remind me, and sometimes when she reminds me, I don't want her to remind me. So every once in a while, it still happens, even now. I can't say that. In the beginning, I had certain points where, to me, my escape answer was, okay, it's time to go kill myself, literally, which was something that was there from when I was a teenager. And those three keys, the first three beatitudes, without going into the language of it, the first one is to breathe, to get your breath moving, pay attention to your breath in any minute, in any moment, whenever something's happening, even if something's not happening or doesn't seem to be. The second one is to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. It's got to be okay, not necessarily that I don't know if okay is the word, but you're not necessarily saying, okay, good, let's hang out with this necessarily. But if you keep your breath moving and you allow yourself to feel it rather than resisting it, which will create more suffering from you. And the third beatitude, allow it to breathe, allow it to flow, allow it to pass. The only way that it's not going to pass is if, number one, we're not allowing it to move through our system, we're trying to resist it, which is going to recreate it. And number two, we're not breathing. Really, number two is number one. Allow yourself to breathe. And notice when you do have those moments like the hopelessness that you mentioned, for me, when I look back, always when I was there, my breath was off. It was disjointed. I wasn't really paying attention to it. And I'll tell you this, though, when you do with the worksheet process, there's times when essentially you got to eat it. I mean, it comes up and you're sitting there and you're breathing, and there's times that you don't want to breathe and your body wants to shut down. And to me, I liken it to like the ostrich effect of wanting to stick my head in the sand. I don't want to feel this, but that's it. That's the process. The process is breathing and allowing that to start to dissolve in the system. And it might not all happen in one worksheet. I've had some that went on for hundreds. I've done thousands and thousands and thousands. When I was on the support team at Heartland, it was I think we were supposed to do 5 a day. I think I was doing 10 or 12 a day. For months and months and months, and then I kept that going for a very long time, years of at least 3 a day. And yet you go, and another recommendation, save them in a binder. Put them in a 3-ring binder and go back and look at the ones from the beginning a couple of months down the line, and you'll start to see just how much progress you're really making. And the fact that you can actually do this, that you've got this tool, you've got this key in your hands, The gratitude I feel now, over 17 years into it, is I can't even put that into words, because I don't know if I'd even be alive without it right now. I don't know that. And I've had that hopelessness, the despair, the even suicidal tendencies in the past. It's been a long time since I felt something like that, but it's because I was willing to get in there and do the work. And you're not alone. You've got a huge support system of not just Michael and me and Kim, and there's David at Heartland. I mean, this system has moved it's all across the earth, and it's getting bigger. What is it? Every mind on the planet, right, Michael?
That's the idea. Every mind, heart, and being on the planet is the commitment to take the tools to them. And, if you go back to James 2,000 years ago, he says, stop your denial. And notice that when I feel something that I don't want to feel and I hold my breath, my brain can hallucinate that somebody else is the problem in my life. And I actually believe that they're the problem in my life, that they're causing me to feel what I'm feeling. And that's why I'm so delighted for you that you can acknowledge that hopelessness, because in acknowledging that hopelessness, you've taken the first step out of denial. I feel hopelessness. Now, then when you take the next step, and that is you give up your denial, and that is that it's because of what my wife does, then I get to clear the hopelessness of 1,000 generations. Stop and think about down through the years, just what little you know or how much you know about history, but just think about how many generations in your family system had 8, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I had one woman that worked for me back about 40 years ago, and she was from a family of 32 children. Wow. Imagine being back in medieval England or Poland or, Russia or Siberia and having a family of 32 children and not being able to feed them. Guess what? That's in your genetics. You want to talk about hopeless? I mean, we've got it so good that it's a joke to think there's anything to be hopeless about in this culture. But that's part of what's in our neuronet, and because we live in denial and dissociate from that, our brain, out of the dissociated brain cells, when somebody resonates those brain cells for us, our brain hallucinates or builds a picture of them, and they show up in our mind with our problem attached, and we're sure that it's theirs. There's one absolutely foolproof way to tell, actually we'll give you two, to tell whether or not what you're feeling is yours. Number one is you're feeling it, and number two, that when you are feeling it, you're blaming somebody else for it. There's going to be hostility or fear accompanying it. Whenever there's any form of hostility or fear, and this is like such a huge piece of the puzzle to get. Whenever there's any form of hostility or fear happening in a person's physiology, they're in denial. They're hiding from themselves what needs to be changed. And so now what needs to be changed can't be changed. It's impossible because I can't see it directly. I can only see it projected into my brain's image of you. And, of course, I can't change what belongs to you, and I'm dissociated from it in me, so now it's a permanent condition. Once you start to realize, I have hostility or fear, I'm holding my breath, I'm blaming someone else, now I know my mind is dealing with corrupt data. So here's another piece of corrupt data that I need to move out of my mind. Ta-da! There's my work.
That's great. So just to keep moving it out, just keep, as you guys suggested, keep breathing, keep doing the worksheets, keep taking responsibility.
Exactly. And, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, you'll be scratching the surface. Of course, there are people who after 6 months, a year, 5, we have people that show up at Heartland, and after 2 weeks, they know how to tell us exactly how to do this. They know all about it, and of course, they know all about it out of their hostility and fear. So, it's just like, okay, so here we are, the next level, and running a center is not always that easy because everybody thinks they know what everybody else's business is, and everybody after just, a very short period of time. I've had people in their first workshop that were so expert at it, they could tell me how to teach the workshop.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
You've never had that happen, Dale.
My favorite line is when someone comes up to me after a workshop and they say, I've already heard all this before, but it's kind of nice to be, to hear it again sometimes. And it's like, okay. Yeah. No, I never get any of that.
When was the last time you canceled a goal in order to forgive? Well, what do you mean? What's that? Well, I thought you already heard it all. It's like, no, this piece has been missing from planet Earth for 2,000 years.
You speak of that. There's a lot of forgiveness, quote unquote work out there, forgiveness work, and the canceling's not there. If you're not removing the root, there's no forgiveness. Just sort of, easing it out of the system doesn't quite work like that. You've got to literally get in there and you've got to cancel it, but you got to face it in order to cancel it. And that's the main key missing from 99% of the forgiveness processes that I've ever seen. I can't even really call them forgiveness processes. Is the cancel? If it's not canceling, it's not forgiveness. So.
Yeah, it's not forgiveness at all. It's pardoning, and that's what's happened is that pardoning has been substituted for forgiveness. And the reason why our culture is in so much insanity is because these hostilities and fears that we add to our structure, we add genetically, and they're cumulative from generation to generation to generation until somebody comes along and actually knows how to crack open that dissociated mind and remove the content. It gets crazier and crazier. And that's just part of the game. That's part of this process of healing. And, we oftentimes will refer to what I call the Eighth Beatitude crew. And in essence, what Yeshua says in the Eighth Beatitude is, hey, if you're actually teaching truth, there are going to be people who are going to puke all over you.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just part of the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. The last three Beatitudes, he sort of sums up in Aramaic what he basically says. He's talking about persecuted, dislocated for speaking truth. And if you look at that in Aramaic, it basically says, look, if you're kicked off your center, the kingdom is yours because you're awake enough to see that even though you were kicked off your center, you now realize that that was not your center. This is your center. If you're kicked off this center and dislocated from here, good. You're already connected into the kingdom. That's great for you because that wasn't your center either. This is. Wherever you go, your center point is right here and right now. And understand that when we have the attachment to conditions, we create that suffering in our lives, not understanding that we're sort of got that vicious circle, vicious circle, vicious circle. Yeah, it's such a beautiful, it's just been totally lost. So much of it has just been totally, people say, oh, yeah, I like the Beatitudes. They're neat. And it's like you've probably never heard them in your life, but, yeah. It's so beautiful.
And that's why I'm so delighted that our caller called in and said, yeah, I'm in hopelessness. And that's, you look at how the intellect grabs a hold of this. I was absolutely amazed. There's one sane voice in Washington, D.C., a man who's held 4,000 newborn babies. You can't not be cleansed when you've held 4,000 times the direct conscious active presence of love coming into the world. And it was really interesting in the debate 2-3 nights ago, or I guess it was earlier in the week, last week, Ron Paul actually suggested, now he's in South Carolina, which is considered to be, kind of the center of religious thought, or one of the states that's, really committed and all about Jesus. And Ron Paul suggested that we actually embody and use the teachings of Jesus. He said, let's do the golden rule. And he was booed. Were you aware of that? Did you listen to that debate?
I didn't hear that one, no, but it's funny because he's basically labeled as a nut job all the time because people just, they can't, it's in them. And it's like, oh, it's got to be in him. It's got to be in him, not me. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the eighth attitude. They're going to puke on him because he's bringing them truth and their stress goes up. But I was just amazed and appalled as I listened to him, and he says, he directly quotes exactly what Yeshua said to do in this place that's like one of the strongholds, supposedly, of Christianity, and he was booed for saying, let's live the golden rule.
Wow.
It's like, how much closer can you get to Yeshua 2,000 years ago when he says, you say all the right words, but your hearts are far from me. Let's get back to the actual teachings. Let's stop kidding ourselves that when we believe in war and killing people, that we have any interest whatsoever in what the man named Yeshua said, because we don't. we're lying to ourselves. Our words say all the right things, but as he said 2,000 years ago, our hearts are a long ways away. It's time to bring our hearts into alignment with the active presence of love. And it's no easy task. It's not a task for wimps. There aren't many people that have any interest in it. They love to talk about it and say they understand it and they know it and they believe in him. But how many people be living it? That's what we're here to support you in doing, be living those teachings.
So, Michael, we have two things I want to mention. We have about 5 minutes left. One is there's a question about some written resources for Aramaic, and the question, where on the planet is Aramaic used in conversation today? But even more important than that, Nene was typing into the chat room, and Nene said it's absolutely amazing. This is one of the women who has only learned the material in the past year and is taking it out to the world in English and Spanish. But she said it's amazing to be meeting with her daughter after 2.5 years. And she had her daughter doing worksheets, and yesterday her daughter was only able to drag her leg around, and today they noticed she's actually taking steps. So her daughter got on and said, thanks, I will continue to do this work forever. Thanks for the healing, and thanks for exposing my mother to this work.
Very cool. That's absolutely awesome. We're delighted. And Nene's not back yet, is she? She's still in South America?
Well, she said that she can't listen to the show, but she was able to text because she was at a hotel. So I'm imagining she's down there with her daughter still.
Okay, right, yeah, cool. Fabulous.
So it's that and a request for, I know that Dale at the end of Carol's show was giving out some book titles and authors that he thought were very good about the Aramaic. Of course, the book we want to really talk about is Why Is This Happening to Me Again, and the worksheets, which can be found at whyagain.com. And there's a page for download worksheets that gives plenty of resources to learn how to do this process. And Dale, what else do you want to say? We got about 3 minutes left.
Well, the books I referred to in the last one was books that sort of reference Kabbalah. People need to get 2 books. There's one which is Why Again, and the second is actually what Michael sells, the Purest Enlightenment, spiral bound. Literally, I have been everywhere and looked at every translation of Aramaic, the Aramaic words of Yeshua, and the most high fidelity I've ever seen was from the Kabbalist Codex Foundation. Get it through. Mike, it's available in your site, right? Why Again?
It sure is. Yeah, just go to whyagain.com and into the catalog and the Enlightenment books there.
Yeah, people need to get it. Get it in your hands, and, I mean, even just spend time back in the glossary and the index. It's just a phenomenal. That's really the thing that started me after the workshops and everything. It was sitting down with that book back in 1995 for a summer and just studying it forward to back, forward and back, forward and back, forward and backward, over and over and over and over and over again. So that when I did get into the scholarly stuff, I went in sort of not buying into that whole mental thing too much until I just had to basically leave it. But I did get a lot of what I needed from it information-wise too, the scholarly field. But yeah, I mean, Why Again is the core of all of it. It really is. And without it, honestly, I don't think there's any base. And I don't know of any other that has that kind of base out there. I've never seen it, honestly. A lot of people teaching Aramaic stuff, but without forgiveness, it really, most of it is it's just noise. It's noise. It's excess information. You need that base.
Yeah, I call the intellectual journey mental masturbation, and we need to stop that and do the real thing. And we're down to about 20 seconds. So, Dale, thank you. Your website is Dale Hoffman.
DaleAllenHoffman.com.
Dale
Allen Hoffman. Yeah, they can just Google Dale Aramaic, and it'll pop up. So.
Dale Aramaic, and you can pick up your DVD from the site. Delight to have you with us. We'll have to do it again, and thanks for being with us. Dr. Tim, thanks for taking care of the chat room and the control panel. David, we hold you in a blessing, and we'll be in touch. Blessings. Bye-bye.